While women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression, men are more likely to underreport or suppress their symptoms due to societal expectations about masculinity, which contributes to a higher risk of suicide, higher rates of suicide, and other mental health crises. Do you believe those stats?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually I brought brought a very similar stat. It's like the suicide rate, I think, is it's super telling. And if you, I mean, in my experience, right, like I don't have all the perfect answers, but if you talk about generally what are men expected to do, I had this discussion recently with my wife. She's like, I never really knew that, you know, and this is going to sound funny, men were so emotional. And I was like, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, how can you maintain what society would call manhood while still being vulnerable, right? What's that balance? And if you're saying, take complaining out of it, right? You're just saying, this is how I feel. I feel good. I feel bad. I feel uncomfortable. I feel, anxious. How and when is it okay to say those things? And have we gotten to a place where men are actually comfortable doing that? And I truly don't think that we are necessarily there. And if it does happen, and you think back to like your high school days or your college days, and it's like, man, I'm having a hard time. It's like, okay, great. And like you get called names for it. And it's like you get picked on and ridiculed, and like maybe someone is actually having a hard time, right? And that was them extending that one moment where they're saying, okay, I'm going to float this out to my best guys, and I'm going to see how it's met, because I'm struggling so much that I need to say these words out loud. And it happens to be like with guys that are going to end up picking on you for it. And now you're done. The walls go up.
Yeah.
Who else are you going to turn to? Like, that was my best shot. It's like, I really am alone in all this. And how do you process that? Right. So like for me, like I've seen those stats, I've seen similar stats. I do believe those stats are true. Uh, I think it's one of the biggest challenges that our society here in the US, I don't know if it's across the world, the same kind of challenges with like being vulnerable, but like you can maintain masculinity, you can maintain power, you can maintain strength, you can maintain like a godly walk, you can maintain all of these things and and start talking about it and be vocal about it. You don't like, I think stoicism may have its place, but that doesn't mean turning off what it means to be a human man. And being able to share that with each other and have these types of conversations and these types of moments. So, yeah.
David Dillard, ladies and gentlemen. So,
It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
yeah.
Because there's guys that are in it right now. You know?
Quentin, what do you think when you read those kind of stats? And before I go forward, I probably should have acknowledged this is my brother-in-law. Quentin's my brother-in-law, and then David is his brother-in-law. So
Yeah.
we run in some family circles, and a lot of these
Right.
conversations are extensions of things that we have talked about before. And I want to get your thoughts, just immediate thoughts on those stats, but then I'll probably jump to David because David. Oh, you're good. You're good. Yeah, David actually has some an interesting. I'm going to dive into a little bit of what got you started in these conversations in just a little
Yeah.
bit. But Quentin, right off the bat, though, when I read stats like that, what goes through your head? Like, what do you think about? Does it shock you?
It does not shock me. I think the word gets thrown around too much, but pandemic. I think there's a pandemic in men where we are afraid, or we have been taught over the last handful of decades or however long, to swallow our feelings and
Bury it. Yeah.
bury it. You got the phrase "man up." I think it's a good phrase, but I think it basically is just a blanket statement for, get over it. Don't feel things. Don't express things. Don't tell your boys things, because your boys are for watching sports and you know playing games. But it's like, man, if you look back in time, um, men never walked alone. Like, it's only in the last, you know, few hundred years. I don't know stats on that, but um,
Fact check that.
fact check that. Ask Jamie. Um,
Jamie, is that?
Jamie, can you put that on the screen? Oh, wrong podcast. Sorry. Um, but like, if you look back, everybody roamed together. The hunters and the gatherers, they went out together. They sat around the fire together. Um, but nowadays, we go to work, we come home, we, hopefully are serving our wife and our children, if you're married and have children. But it's oftentimes men don't have communities around them to express these things. And if you don't have the men around you, and we'll get into it, but godly men around you, you are going to struggle because you have no outlet. And if you do not have a relationship like that with other men, and then there's also an issue of men don't express their stuff to their wives. And that is your closest friend, who she's there to hear all of your burdens. And we've got to get back to a place where it's like, bro, if you are afraid to tell your wife what you're struggling with, you've got to fight through that uncomfortableness because she's there for you. And so I agree. I mean, it's just the weight that this world puts on men. It is unbearable to do it alone.
Yeah, it is easier said than done, for sure.
For sure.
To get into, and we'll dive into a little later, the practical side of, what it means to be a man in your marriage and parenting and in the workplace and some other things. But it is a lot easier said than done to do that with your spouse, I think. Probably for men and women, but especially for men, there's things that if you let out of the closet, like, they will never think of you the same way. And you do have to figure out what can they bear and what can they not, what can they hold and what can they not. And, I'm sure they're having the same conversations in their heads with us. If I tell them this, if I admit this to them, they'll never look at me the same way. I might not be as beautiful to them. I might not, they might not want to be affectionate with me, or that, so I think we all think through those things differently. We all suppress those differently. And, I might get into it too, but yeah, I've had some really dark moments, even in the past 6 months, where it's like, man, if I tell my wife all the things I'm thinking, she'll never be able to look at me the same way. And I think when I read stats like this, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It really adds up. So
where are you supposed to go with it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where do you go? And maybe it's not something that is a public conversation. Maybe it's a you and her conversation, and you have nowhere to go now, right?
Like, I think, because we live in a sinful and fallen world, that stuff is almost guaranteed for every single person. The problem is that we don't have tools to address it with. And by tools, I don't mean like pragmatic, like things. If you do this, it'll make your depression go away. But I think we have lost the ability to sit. I don't want this to sound wrong, but we have been taught that, or not taught, but so much of the world around us is like, when things get tough, the only way out is death, is I have to take my life. But as men, because we have been taught by the world around us, our parents, our grandparents, whoever it might be, that because we can't communicate this stuff to other men or to our wives, that it is the only way. And we have lost the ability to sit in that pain. And again, I'm not trying to throw a blanket statement, but some of the darkest moments of my life have been some of the moments where I have learned most about who God is. And I don't mean that when I brought my troubles to him that he just made them go away. But it was in those moments where, right when I first became a believer, that I wanted to give up everything, because this life that I had formulated and I thought was giving me purpose and value, all of that value was taken away from it. And I saw it for the emptiness that it was. And I was like, I want to give up. But it was in the suicidal depression of the Lord showing me the emptiness of what I was putting value in, was where I learned about how much he loves me. And so when I read something like Psalm 42, where it says, like, these are the guys, the sons of Korah, who are leading worship for the Israelites. Fact check me on that. I think they are. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil within me? This man is feeling like this hard reality inside of his soul and in his mind. The next line, hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. So he doesn't say that here's how I get out of this. He's feeling the weight of life. And then he just clings to the hope and to the memory that God is good. And that God, being faithful and good, will eventually alleviate this. And it's not a boom, you're going to feel better the next day or the next hour. But if in that pain, you can go to God and let him hug you and let him hold you and remind you that he will not let you down, you can get through it. And then when you add the layer of going to other men who love God and say, hey man, I'm struggling with this, help me to remember the goodness of God, that weight gets so much lighter when you have other people in your life to help you go to battle. But it's when you sit at home alone and you've got to make these voices in your head quiet, where you turn to alcohol or you turn to the P word, or I don't think you can say it on YouTube. That's why I'm.
Yeah, I think they demonetize me.
Yeah, you got to say corn. Where that's why so many men turn to these things, is because we feel that emptiness. And it's like, well, if I can't express this, I got to make these voices quieter somehow. I got to numb the pain somehow. And so that's where like I want to help guys understand, like, you're going to feel the weight of life because people sin against you and you sin, and that has an immediate effect on how you feel, because it's causing a felt distance between you and God. If you're a Christian, it's gonna cause a felt division, not a reality. There's no division being caused between you and God. That's settled. But you're gonna feel distant from him. If you're an unbeliever, like, that's why we tell people, like, come to Jesus where there's hope and there's life. Because if you're an unbeliever struggling with this stuff and you don't want to turn to Jesus, I don't know what the answer is, because I don't think there is one. And that's why we see so many, like, the world out there, just unbelieving world, is just riddled with anxiety and struggle of every kind. We every day we see coming up with new ways to numb the pain, instead of addressing it head on. And like it's hard and it's difficult, but I mean, it's worth it. It's peace and it's life, and it's joy. And it may, like I said, it may not go away immediately, and it may be something you struggle with forever.
It's a fight.
But I promise you that fight is worth it.